think we'll have Mitch as the minority leader in the Senate after the election?
Is there any chance Democrats can take the Senate back? They have to get good candidates in those races.
What we can say at this point is that Democrats have missed on all of their top-tier recruits so far. Georgia.
Stacey Abrams not running for Georgia.
Abrams not running. Cindy Axne in Iowa just said no last week. I'm missing a bunch.
Well, you're missing the fact that although it's interesting, we could have 30 minutes on Castro versus MJ Hager here in Texas.
Yeah, well, MJ Hager's going to run.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's, you know what McConnell always tells us? Don't fall in love with the map. No matter what the map is telling you now, each race is won on individual merits.
But aren't those were all going to be stretches? Isn't Arizona as important to that calculation? Democrats got their preferred candidate and an uncontested primary, it appears, right? In Mark Kelly, the astronaut, Gabby Gifford's husband.
Yeah, I mean, there are just a lot of states that we think we know the story in, but we actually might not.
So the assumption that Cory Gardner, the Republican in Colorado, which is a state that has consistently gone Democratic at the presidential level, the assumption that he is the #1 target for the Democrats, does that necessarily mean he loses?
I don't think it means he loses. I think it's going to be a tough race for him.
And I think he's
Really
going to have to spend $30 million.
Wouldn't it have been better for Hickenlooper to run for the Senate than for president?
Oh God, he would hate the Senate.
Most governors hate, more than anything, when they come to Washington because they're used to being the executive.
Go from being one of one to being one of many.
Yes.
Right, and having no power.
And having no power.
Right. Okay, other questions for our friends, please. We've got a microphone up here. Jump in.
That's okay. We've answered all your questions.
I
That's a good
mean,
sign.
perfect.
It was a remarkably efficient interview. What do you want to know from these guys? I mean, we must have covered everything.
We did.
Ma'am, go ahead. Good. Thank you.
It seems like the Democrats are in a real bind. Like anything that they want to do, the investigations, the subpoenas, whatever, they have to go through the Department of Justice.
Yes.
Is there any way forward?
Well, we just were talking about this today. I mean, if Democrats hold Bill Barr in contempt, which it seems like they will.
So Nadler has gone back and said to him, basically, you got one more chance.
To get me documents.
And then we're going to go after you.
Yeah, and remember, Republicans held Eric Holder in contempt in 2012 over the Fast and Furious gun running probe. And Eric Holder didn't leave office, and neither will Bill Barr. And a court eventually told the Department of Justice that they needed to fork over documents to Congress, and Congress won. So I do think this is going to be decided by the courts, but it won't be as quickly as people want it to be, right? I mean, it's going to take time. So
President can run the clock out here. The other thing is that the refusing to honor the subpoenas or to say, I'm not going to let McGahn testify or we're not going to let whomever testify, he can drag this out.
Well,
can't he?
a lot of White Houses assert executive privilege. That's not, he's certainly not the first one. I think the bigger question, we were kind of debating this, I don't know what will happen, but is if Bill Barr continues to say he's not going to testify or different things like that, did Democrats ever reach out to Republicans on this to say, hey, like, well, there's going to be a time when there's a Democratic AG who's going to, breaking the norms of saying, I don't want to have to testify, and do they ever kind of have any bipartisanship on that?
My other question is, so as this is going on, as Pelosi, as the White House is stonewalling essentially the Congress, Pelosi's at the White House saying, let's do an infrastructure bill. So for Trump, I mean, the cost is minimal because he has a willing Democratic House at the moment that's willing to do business with him. If Pelosi said, well, you know what, actually, since you're doing this, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to conduct other business with you until you start forking over documents. Then it becomes a more tricky calculus for the president, in my estimation.
Yeah, but is that a loser for her politically or a winner? Isn't it a loser for her?
I think I think it will be super tough. I think particularly for these new freshmen who came in who do not want to get mired in investigations. I mean, if there's anything they say, we didn't win on investigations. We won because we said we were going to do things. I know
but
what
John Yarmuth from Kentucky said.
But that's not where the freshman members are.
I agree. John Yarmuth from Kentucky, the only Democrat left in Kentucky, said, I know Pelosi keeps saying we won on pocketbook issues, but I go home and everyone keeps asking me about impeachment, not pocketbook issues.
So if you were writing this book now, over the next period of time, those young freshman members, the ones who got elected with great fanfare and are driving so much of the conversation, the Ilhan Omars and the Rashida Tlaibs, the AOCs, of course, these would be main characters because so much of what's happening in that building is being driven by them, is it not?
Yeah, but I think in a very different way than the Freedom Caucus. I mean, the Freedom Caucus was organized with constituted around the idea of trying to oppose and stop their own leadership. You don't have an organized left with AOC and Rashida Tlaib in the same way they have not yet organized to say, we are here to stop bills on the floor that have nothing to do with what we want, just to show you our power.
Okay. Sir.
I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, but I'm struck by the disconnect that we see, and sometimes people call it hypocrisy, looking at Congress, looking at the Republicans in Congress, who seem to be placing their political calculus ahead of just basic morality and right. I mean, to countenance much of the behavior that we see coming from the president and in the White House through the campaign and now in office. It's like, how can they look at themselves in the mirror? And I'm just wondering what your take is on that phenomenon. I mean, it's been talked about a lot, and it just bothers.
Well, as you
the
said,
heck out of
judges,
me.
tax cuts, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so give me an issue specifically. So, and I'll probably I could, if you give me an issue, I could tell you how they would respond in an honest way.
Oh my goodness. All right, the business about paying off porn stars or
Yeah, so-
any of that kind of thing, the corruption and the business and all of that, it's just so tacky, and they pretend as if it's not happening or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something that is tough for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. I think it's tough for them to wrap their heads around. I think on the business stuff, I think that they believe, or they say they believe, most of them, that the president has an existing business empire and, someone else is running it. And that's kind of the end of the story for them. I'm not saying it's the end of the story, period.
Right.
And many of my colleagues in the media have done
Extensive.
great reporting on this.
it's not that the public supports him because they don't know about this stuff. They support him despite the fact that they do know about this stuff. Right?
Exactly, and I think a lot of members of Congress would say there was no mystery about the guy. He won election given the fact that people knew he lived and existed in one of the largest cities in the country, where he was the subject of tabloid coverage every week for 2 decades or whatever, however long it was and however frequent it was, and he was known to have had affairs and many wives and business dealings that came under scrutiny, and still, even given that, he was elected. And the morality question, I can't tell you what they go home and when they get in bed at night, what they say to their wife. Many of them who are religious people and say, I can't tell you what that is. We always talk about, could we put this person on truth serum and what would they say? That was Jim Vandehei, our founder, always said, what would he tell you if you were on truth serum?
I'd start with Franklin Graham. If Barack Obama had paid off a porn star, Franklin Graham would be first in line,
I agree.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, one of the questions we talk a lot about, which is more, I think, interesting to kind of what happens on the Hill, is you had for 10 years Republicans saying, we need to cut the deficit and we're going to reduce spending. And then Donald Trump comes in and he doesn't hear about any of those things.
In fact, the deficit balloons don't even go to porn stars, just go to the deficit.
Just go to hard actual
Or go to both, I guess.
Republican orthodoxy, though, and they have kind of really thrown that out the window with Donald Trump.
Isn't there, though, I mean, let's knock both sides. Isn't there, we're living in an era of weapons-grade chutzpah where you are outraged about the thing that you yourself was doing 5 minutes ago? I mean, haven't the two sides flipped?
Yes, I can't tell you how many times we say this. They're all, to some degree, phonies. I hate to say it, and I would say that publicly. I guess I am saying it publicly. I would say that. I would say that to
No,
them.
seriously, don't hold back.
Yeah. No. But I would. There's hypocrisy in all of. I mean, with all of them.
But it's politics, Anna, right? This is not the first time we've seen. I was remembering when Gorsuch did not get a hearing within 1 minute of being nominated, and the Republicans were complaining that poor Gorsuch was not being given a hearing. And everybody was like, cough, cough, Merrick Garland, cough, cough. In fact, I think one of the greatest things in this book is the fact that the president, confronted with an opening on the Supreme Court, had a conversation with McConnell, right? In which he said, maybe I should nominate
Not McConnell, but with Republicans,
With
yeah.
Republicans, pardon me. Maybe I should nominate Merrick Garland.
Yeah, and we
We don't
didn't-
know how, if he was just making a joke or
That's the
how
thing with
serious
Trump.
he
We
was.
don't know what
But
the
yes,
level
it
of
was
seriousness
something he at
is.
least was willing to talk about.
Right. I mean, the Merrick Garland, Gorsuch, why is there not a hearing for the guy we just nominated when we didn't even give the other guy a hearing, is like a great example, but hardly the only example of how roles of.
I'll give you another example
Yeah.
that fits into your question before, which is, take a step back. When we started writing this book, the question we got most often was, tell me about Mitch McConnell. He's the biggest mystery in the world. And I
Right.
see a lot of people nodding, so I guess a lot of people agree here. And he's not really an enigma to us. He likes to win, and he does anything he can do to win. So after the Kavanaugh situation, we interviewed him, and our editor, who's a New York-based literary editor, who is probably a little bit left of center, to say the least.
Possibly.
He said to us, I want to know like what McConnell was feeling during this moment and like what his thinking was about Kavanaugh. And you kind of want to go in there and be like, and have him kind of spill his guts. And we said to him, we went at him a bunch. We had a very, very long interview with him. And he said, I'll tell you how I feel. And this is in the book. He said, for 1 week, all of my speeches were carried live on TV. And if you factor out Republicans, my approval rate, he said my approval rating went from 30% to 60%. All the radio talk show hosts that said I was some wimpy Republican now say I stood strong, and I know it won't last, but for right now, I'm a rock star. That's how he felt about the Kavanaugh episode. So a lot of the times when you want those kinds of moments where the
It's a
morality
reflection,
clicks,
right.
that the morality actually is what you see it to be, which is actually this is our guy, and we're not going to be intellectually honest with ourselves. Don't you think that's probably true to some degree?
Well, I don't know if I'd say they're not intellectually honest, but no, I
think even they would admit that it's not
I
intellectually
think
honest.
what sometimes we are hoping for some moment of
Statesmanship,
yes,
yeah.
or behind the scenes really struggling with this, and I think we often
You're
don't get it.
disappointed, right?
Sometimes it's just as simple as it could be.
Yeah,
That's it.
Sometimes it is what it is.
Anybody else before we let these guys go off and have Mexican food? Ma'am?
What's happening? What happened to Lindsey Graham?
Well,
good, an
fire
easy
up the
one.
camera. We should
Exactly.
do another show.
An easy one for the last question.
I mean, I don't know. I'll go and then you can add on, but I think one, he's up for re-election. I think.
So he's popular.
I
Question
think
was what happened to
Donald
Lindsey Graham?
Trump is very popular in South Carolina. Lindsey Graham could not get closer to him. And I think what you're seeing is the fact that he is running for re-election. And I think you've seen a lot of different phases of, people like to just remember, Lindsey Graham is kind of trying to cut immigration deal with John McCain. And I think for the most part, Lindsey Graham has now figured out how he wants to work with the president and what he needs to do, and it is to hold and be
Yeah.
as close to the president as possible.
I mean, Jake, here we were yesterday with Lindsey Graham chairing the Judiciary Committee hearing, or 2 days ago in the Senate, where Barr is there, and he is Graham is like the Trump ally of all Trump allies, and then of course on every cable station they then run the clip of Graham during the presidential campaign saying the most awful things about Trump imaginable. Well, nobody back home in South Carolina cares about what he said about Trump back then because he's being Trump's ally now, right?
Right.
He's
And
absolved himself.
He said he had during one of the really heated moments in the last 3 or 4 months, a local reporter confronted him in South Carolina and said, explain this to us. Like, we're your hometown voters, explain this to us. And he said, I think the people of South Carolina elected me he said, John McCain was my very good friend. I don't like when the president makes fun of John McCain, and I've told him that. But the people of South Carolina have also elected me to get things done with this president. So I'm going to maintain a good relationship with him, and I don't appreciate him making fun of my dead friend. That's what he said. I mean, I think maybe that is just what it is. These people are in a business, these people being politicians, where sometimes it takes doing business with people you don't completely agree with to get things done.
And compartmentalized, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's what we're seeing with Nancy Pelosi and what's happening on infrastructure versus all the investigations.
Right.
Yeah.
It's customer service business.
Yeah.
We work for you. I'm going to represent you, even if I don't like it, even if I may have said something different at some point. In order for me to work for you and
Yeah.
represent you, I've got to
Yeah.
get along with this guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's that simple.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love these guys so much. Give them a big
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you all for coming.